Hello and welcome to the Lifting the Iceberg podcast. My name is Tyler James Berger, and on this episode, I sit down with Caren Charles to talk about her painting titled The Resurrection of the Hummingbird. Caren is a Hudson Valley-based visionary artist, body painter, and vocalist who draws the inspiration for her work from the beauty found in nature, and whose creative process blends together intentional subject matter with free-flow creation. Caren is an amazing artist, and it was so fun to have this conversation with her. So, without any further ado, please welcome Caren Charles. Okay, Caren Charles, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So today we're talking about your piece, The Resurrection of the Hummingbird. And this is such a beautiful, vibrant piece that is so emblematic of your style as an artist. And in this piece, the core element is the hummingbird in the center. And it's so much so that everything else in the painting seems to serve primarily as a frame to accentuate the beauty and significance of the hummingbird in the middle of the painting. So my first question is, well, what was the inspiration for this piece, and what does the hummingbird symbolize for you?
Nice. Awesome. Well, I'm going to start by saying that I didn't know it was going to be a hummingbird when I first started this painting. This was one of my first live paintings. This was in 2013, when I had first been introduced, or was just starting to immerse myself into the live painting scene at festivals, and transitioning from ink and watercolor to acrylic paints. So, my process has always been very intuitive, and if you see my earlier works, a lot of it was completely abstract. So, introducing digestible subject matter hadn't really been a thing until this painting. So, so I started with the center, and it was just a light source, and I felt like from the immediate first brush strokes, it turned into a portal. And no, I wasn't tripping, but it was a portal, and I do believe that paintings are portals. But and from there, the outer edge and this frame that we see started to evolve, and I kind of just go with the flow and start playing with shapes and colors that resonate with my mood at the time. And it became, imagining this piece without the hummingbird or the flowers, it felt like a mirror. Like, the mirrors that you have, like you can hold them by like a handheld mirror. Yeah. It felt like, that was the first time I processed paintings as a mirror reflection of like the artist's soul. Yeah, for sure. And it was just such a great sensation, diving into these details around just like something so simple as a light source. So for a while it was just the light source in the center, and then you were building up the designs and the frame around that portal, that center of light. So you built this layer around the outside before you even added the element of the hummingbird in the center. Exactly. It's like it was organically morphing into something that I didn't necessarily know what, but the more it developed, I kept, one of the fun things about the intuitive way to go is that you can stand back and observe what's being created before you and play with your eyes and see what you see. Yeah, so you didn't have a solid vision of what you wanted this piece to be, because sometimes a lot of visionary artists will have a vision, and painting is simply the medium through which they bring life to a vision that they already had. But that isn't necessarily always your style of visionary art. Yours is very much so, I think, like an active visionary process where you kind of explore
and create as you're creating.
Yeah, and taking inspiration from the moment and allowing the piece to unfold and almost take on a life of its own. A lot of my paintings, I like to think it's like an entity or a presence in a room. And I would say that that's true for a lot of original paintings. You can definitely feel the contrast between a Giclée print versus an original painting. I mean,
a poster of the Cosmic Christ by Alex Gray is a lot different than standing in front of the Cosmic Christ.
Oh yeah.
I totally get that. And I think that it's partly because in some way an original painting captures the vibration of the artist's intention and emotion as they were creating it. And it also reverberates the environment that artist was in when they started to bring the painting into being. So what kind of environment
100%.
were you in when you started to give birth to this piece?
Yeah, so I was immersed in a sea of live painters. It was something unlike I've ever seen or experienced before. This particular festival called Rootwire, in 2013. It was a festival organized by Papadozio, the band Papadozio. They had a festival in Ohio, and they put an equal emphasis on the visual arts and the music. So it wasn't just a music festival. It was like they really did a great job of curating an amazing visionary art lineup. And
have you live painted before that?
Once.
So you were very new to the game.
So new. Just at the very, very beginning of my journey into discovering, the whole visionary art scene and,
exploring acrylics.
And because like I said, I was exploring ink and watercolor. These are very fine, detailed mediums on paper. I'd just be, up close, tiny details. That doesn't really lend itself well when you're in a live setting and you want people to be able to observe your creative process. So I was like, I'm just going to go bigger, and see how it goes.
Start with this big luminous light source in the middle that kind of like catches people's attention like moths to a light bulb. One of the things that I think is really interesting about live painting is that when you have a piece and there's music playing all around through these huge speakers, everything is just vibrating with the music that's playing. Those vibrations get caught in the painting itself, kind of like how you transcribe music onto a record player.
Exactly.
Did you feel that at all when you were painting around this music?
Yeah, it's almost like, we know the saying, energy flows where attention goes. And I definitely feel like paintings capture the essence, or almost like, they just, it's infused. The atmosphere gets infused into the art.
Because the art was marinating in that environment.
Right,
it just
which
kind
is
of picks
something,
it up.
which is why I'm so attracted to live painting. Because so it definitely captures that essence, and you can see how in the center this light source is rippling, almost like a sound wave, or like a bass wave or something like that.
Yeah, and you said when you started to explore live painting, you were also exploring the genre of visionary art. What did your, exposure to the world of visionary art, how did that influence the creation of this piece? Because in a lot of visionary art, I see this motif of some kind of like two-dimensional frame that gives way to more seemingly three-dimensional space, almost like I've had visuals on ayahuasca that seem to be like this kind of like two-dimensional geometric structure along the perimeter that opens up into more of a landscape where you see more three-dimensional imagery. Is that something that you've experienced on psychedelics or in a dream or in your imagination, a motif that you intentionally try to manifest with this piece?
With this one specifically, when the flowers and the hummingbird started to evolve, yeah, I mean, because you can clearly see that the hummingbird has more of a rendered look than the two-dimensional border.
Yeah.
I feel like so yeah, when I notice, I want to back up really quick just to see how the correlation happened, but when finding shapes in the patterns that grew from this, I saw a happy circle of frogs. Do you see them?
Oh, I do. Yeah, she's pointing at the painting right now. Each black dot is actually like kind of like the face of a frog with these big kind of cartoonish eyes coming up. Oh, wow. That is talk about a good way of incorporating your older, more abstract style of painting into this new acrylic piece. Because a lot of your older work, like your piece Faces, it's a very abstract representation of the face.
Right.
So this border, and you did that intentionally?
No.
Or that's something you created and then you just stepped back and went, wow.
And I was like, wow, this is really getting frog vibes. I'm feeling jungly. I'm feeling, people came up to me. They're like, oh, that is so ayahuasca. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, well, this really
right.
is, it really does resemble like a classic ayahuasca art piece, like a Pablo Amaringo almost with this like, except not nearly as detailed as some of his pieces. It's almost like a small part of one of his paintings, Right. And I guess the question that I'm getting at is, what is this space that the hummingbird is flying in? Like, what is that space?
It's soul nectar.
It's soul nectar. What is that?
It's what's inside of you and me. And it goes back to that reflection point. Like, the reason why I choose to put subject matter, or like, because at this point I've done a lot of different spirit animals, is to, center it so that when the viewer is looking at it, it is a direct reflection. It's something to feel a part of, to feel on the same level as. So it's like the hummingbird within. And when the hummingbird started to emerge, I started looking into it deeper. What is the hummingbird trying to say? Because I had been seeing, and this goes back to the pulling visions or from a dream realm. Like, I was seeing, not only in real life, I was seeing more hummingbirds in my life, but also the presence in my dreams, and then it just made sense.
So it was appearing to you in reality and in your dreams, which,
and then it just happened to fit.
Reality.
And I was like, wow, that's the missing piece. It wasn't ready, and that's sometimes a lot of times how pieces evolve. I like to think that you can't rush a piece because a bunch of sequence of events need to happen first before you can detect what is missing,
Yeah, that's what I think that's such an amazing thing, an amazing quality about the medium of painting, is that it happens over such a long period of time, where with writing, something that is one of my primary forms of artistic expression, I can write something, I can write an idea that I'm having and write it out in one sitting. Right. And then it's done, and it happened in one flash in that moment, and in that moment of inspiration. But for a painting, it's more of like this prolonged meditation on a thought or on a subject matter or on a symbol that has appeared to you, like the hummingbird. So
I guess I see it, for me, at least my personal process, I see it as in spurts,
Yeah, so it's not because like you worked on it every day for an hour ever since 2013. It like happened in short creative spurts.
Yeah, I wish
what triggers those spurts?
I could say that my practice is like way more steady than it is, but I really feel like it comes out at like the perfect time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at different events, I'll pull out the painting and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, this is the one that's calling to be worked on tonight. And then
Yeah.
boom, like a next step in the puzzle has been added.
How do you balance? So this is something I'm really interested in on a personal level. How do you balance those two types of creativity where you get that sudden spurt of creative inspiration and you decide that now's the time to work on this piece? How do you balance that against the necessity for disciplined, steady, daily work? You know, a lot of painters describe what you're describing, where they only work on their paintings when they're inspired to work on them. But I will also hear a lot of the same painters say that it's important to work every day and to have that discipline. Yeah. And there's a great quote. I forget who said it, but he's like, I only write when inspiration strikes, and I see to it that it strikes at 9 a.m. every morning.
Right, that's good.
And so how do you balance the obvious need for discipline with this acknowledgement of the kind of vibrant productivity that can happen in a short spurt, but might only happen a few times a year?
Right. Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, it is all about showing up. And, you know, if you show up to the easel,
the muse knows where to find you.
Magic is going to happen. So, you know, and I think if I didn't have so many things that I was balancing, because there's a lot of different creative outlets that I enjoy. So there's like a rotation.
And you don't often just have one painting that you're working on at a time. Like I know you have a lot of paintings going on.
Exactly. So it's like a beautiful wheel.
Yeah.
And I think variety is the spice of life. So you gotta have multiple projects going on.
So what is it that pulls you to work on a piece? Do you just kind of like wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and go, I need to work on the Hummingbird piece, you know? Or like when do you just look at it and it just is speaking to you and it's calling for you to work on it? Do you experience it like that? Or do you just look at it as like one of those things that kind of has some dust on it? Maybe you should flesh it out.
I feel like living in a creative community has helped a lot with you know, going back to the piece where I love live painting and I love being in groups to get that creative energy going. And I always feel motivated to work on my paintings in that setting. And then you know, I'll feel excited about the painting once progress is being made. And that's when I know it's time to buckle down in the studio and have the one-on-one time, because majority of my paintings are half live setting and then studio personal time.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of your pieces are inspired by like a live painting, communal painting setting, and then you work on them in your room? Or have you started paintings in your own personal studio space and then brought them out to live painting gigs? Where do you find the most inspiration, at least environmentally speaking?
You know, I do them both.
Both, yeah.
Because I love starting a fresh painting in a live setting. There's something very, you know, it's vulnerable and it can be scary, but if you just jump in, a lot of the magic can happen in those first couple hours.
I feel like that would I feel like starting a painting in a live setting too, that would really open up your channels, so to speak, because you're taking in so much stimulus. You're taking in the music, you're taking in being in a new place, being around so many new people, being exposed to so much new art and so many new artists, that there's so much coming into you that you can kind of like deflect it out of yourself into your creative output. So it seems like that it's almost like turbo fuel, like jet fuel for starting a painting.
Right. Well, it's a good practice of vulnerability too, to not get caught
because people are watching you the whole time.
You know, going back to the, well, we actually didn't even bring it up. Flowdelic.
Yes, that was one of the next questions I wanted to ask you. You've created this word flowdelic, and you've used it to describe your work, and I think it's a great term.
The second it left my mouth, I was like, oh my gosh, that resonates so much.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So what does flowedelic mean to you?
Well, it talks about, flowedelic refers to the process, not being attached to the outcome, and allowing the creative drive and force to just happen. Yeah. Which I know it's kind of a hard thing to explain, but it just, you show up and
you get into that flow state.
Each piece leads to the next, and it's the relationship between the surface of the canvas with the paint and the brush, the shapes that are formed. Each color's relationship to the next one is an exploration, and it's always a check-in of like what feels good, what looks beautiful, because that's at the base core of the why I make art is to beautify and to honor the flow of nature. For sure. And I mean, the flow of nature, that's something I want to get into next, but I think it's interesting. The word flowedelic obviously is kind of like a turn on the phrase psychedelic. Correct.
And psychedelic comes from two root words, Greek roots, psyche and delios. Psyche meaning soul or mind, and delios meaning to manifest. So psychedelics means to manifest the mind manifesting chemicals. And flowedelic means to manifest the flow, to manifest this creative state that so many artists find themselves in. I find myself in it when I'm doing parkour. People find themselves in it when they're playing piano, when they're playing kickball, when they're painting something in a live setting. But I want to get to your use of nature as a primary theme in your art. So in your body of work, you've incorporated everything from trees in eternal bloom to beetles and fish, and bees and peacocks and sprouting seeds, and mushrooms and the moon. So what is it about nature and the figures in nature that inspires you so much?
Well, that's, man, I think nature is everything. Like it's hard to it's kind of like hard to answer that question, because it's like, what is not inspiring about nature? It's like self-evidently God is inspiring. Nature in my mind. The perfection and all the shapes, the metaphor of growth, like this organic growth of Mother Earth, the rise of the divine feminine, like it's all represented in figures of nature. Exactly, and we are extensions of nature. So by painting and being able to express that via color and on you are Carl Sagan said, you are the universe experiencing itself. It's almost like you are nature painting itself. There we go. Right. And there is obviously so much inspiration to be had, like on a simple walk through the woods, and it's also like a respect to nature and to like an ode to it, and a prayer to honor it, and to in some way, it's hard. You can only aspire to reach the perfection of nature. And not saying that my geometries are perfect. I like the organic, subtle imbalance, because that's part of nature too. But like flowers and animals, there's always a sign. I think that there's a certain essence to all of your work that really does manifest the essence of nature in your use of shapes. I know a lot of visionary artists who incorporate more abstract like shapes, like cubes, or you see salvia droid or Zavi. Is very more like sharp geometric edges, things that you wouldn't see in nature, so to speak, but you would see in maybe a psychedelic trip, like maybe more of a DMT experience. But your pieces have this
flowing, bendy, drip drop type of malleable, flowadelic aspect to it. Like the closest thing to a right angle in any of your pieces is, I think, your Honey Drizzle piece, where you incorporate the hexagon. But again, that's a piece found in nature, and you're using only the forms that are found in nature in your paintings. And I think that's a great way of manifesting this kind of mysterious, inspiring essence that people experience when they go on a walk through the woods, or kind of look more deeply at life that they find in the natural world.
Yeah.
You know?
I think another piece by aligning with nature and, with the intent that's going into the painting, wanting this flowadelic style to emit that feeling of movement, of life, almost of breathing,
vibrancy, vitality.
Yeah, exactly.
Like all of your work is so vibrant, and it's just exuding with this vitality, this kind of like light that only emanates from life. And I wanted to ask you, there's so much to be inspired by in nature. There's so much to take as inspiration, and I'm sure as an artist you constantly have ideas of something from nature to incorporate into one of your pieces. I'm sure you constantly have visions of the next great painting of yours inspired by something that you see. Right. And I guess my question is, when does an idea or an inspiring vision gain enough significance or enough momentum in your imagination to push you to turn it into art, to manifest it into the physical world? What is it what's the threshold? When does it push you into making it into art?
Right. Well, I mean, we just talked about the process, how it unfolds naturally, and taking, like, in the moment, going with the flow of life, taking those elements and being like, okay, yes, all the life fingers are pointing to yes. So for me, that's kind of more like when an idea has been percolating enough to where I'm like, I can't ignore it anymore. That's kind of the way to go. And also, what are some of the most base, like the core root, like the essence of what I'm trying to translate. Like, for example, this painting, which is a yoni shape. I mean, this very simple shape translates into so much because it's the portal through which we all came to get here,
Yeah. Is this piece posted on the internet anywhere where people can see it?
This one's actually a work in progress.
Okay.
So I'll post it, but yeah, it's a giant portal.
Yeah. And it is like one of those essential shapes of nature. So
yeah, and I had the idea of like, okay, this is like, again, an ode to the rise of the feminine, honoring nature. This was another live painting at a festival called Unifier. And I got to the property of the festival, and there were so many of the trees there had leaves that were in the same shape of what this composition is. And I physically, if you look closely, there's all those leaves embedded into the piece. Yeah. And, I love synchronicities. I love, playing with the magic of life and finding those correlations and those aha moments of like, wow, this really all fits to the puzzle. Yeah. And I couldn't have been able to put that together, a week ago, but it all makes sense now. Yeah. In this present moment. That's what I kind of had like the intonation of, that you see these patterns in nature and you get inspired by something in nature, and then you make art out of it once it's significance or once some kind of meaning announces itself to you. Right. It's like there are so many beautiful patterns in nature, but art
one of the main purposes of art is to convey meaning,
Right.
to convey a feeling to that you've had, that you're now using art to use as a medium for someone else to get a grip on that feeling that you had that inspired that piece.
Yes. And that's something that has been developing in my work for the past 5 years, or that's something I love so much about the visionary art scene. Taking those really powerful visions that are meant to uplift the globe, the everyone that lays its eyes upon it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I've aimed to have a blend between the very abstract flow and also incorporating some subject matter that people can actually like identify with. That
is meaningful and symbolic in some way. Like I
absolutely.
don't look at any of your pieces and just think that they are solely decorative.
Right.
They're so beyond decorative. And when I look at one of your pieces, I feel like there is a feeling that you wanted to do your best to curate. You wanted to do your best to curate someone else's experience that they have while looking at your piece. I feel like what do you want people to feel when they look at your art?
Vibrant and charged and energized. I mean, it takes it back to color therapy. People feel good when they see color, and different colors correspond to different things. So a lot of my work has this orangey, the nectar color, the orange sacral chakra, which that gets that's the color of creativity and life force energy. So
and of light,
and of light,
like this fire light.
Yeah, I want it to feel warm. I want it to feel like a fire.
Like the vibrant fire of life.
Yeah. But then, I have some cooler pieces that are like, that was inspired by snow, or the painting I'm referring to is the moon shroom painting.
Which is on your Instagram if people can see it.
Yeah. That one's up. So yeah, that one might be a more cooling, more relaxing vibe than the vibrant.
But then again, that might be a cooler piece, but you still have the radiance of the moon.
Yeah,
the fire in the blood moon.
Yeah,
that's what that
true.
was. You and I saw that.
Right.
I think the moon that was inspired by. You and I were out on the roof that night.
Sure did, and it snowed, so like adding the snowflakes in it, that was directly inspired by that night. That moon was white until the blood moon happened.
Yeah.
And that was the night I was like, okay, I gotta
be a blood
put it
moon.
in there.
Yeah. And I bet it didn't feel finished until you added that in.
And it just made sense at that moment, which, again, I didn't plan that. Couldn't have been planned.
Yeah. So back to the Hummingbird piece, like, is this still a work in progress? Do you have the
finished.
feeling? How do you know when it's finished?
It just, it
'Cause
encapsulates its time. It serves its purpose. I don't think this is one of the pieces that I will never sell, because it's such a soul piece.
Yeah.
It really reminds me to stay in the flow, like to enjoy the nectar of life, to be the hummingbird. Hummingbirds are such magical creatures, and it's almost, it takes you into that character of remembering that piece of yourself. And I'll make prints and share that with people, obviously. But
oh, cool! I'll be sure to post that when you do.
Sweet.
Let people know. And one of my other questions for you is, what is your definition of visionary art?
My definition of visionary art, Well, my understanding of visionary art is art that comes, because for so long art focused on trying to portray this external reality and trying to depict it of like, this is what we see. Visionary art is that, and some blending visions that come from, dream states or, higher states of consciousness, and being able to describe that in an image. So it's still, from the mind's eye.
From the third eye.
From the third eye. Yeah, exactly. That's my definition, I'd say. And I think it's still a morphing definition. And I think through the current visionary art culture, it's still morphing.
Yeah, and that's something that I've really I've been looking forward to getting at with this podcast and asking visionary artists what their definition of visionary art is, because
anything with sacred G in it,
yeah,
and the third eye,
if it has a flower of life, then
exactly.
Congratulations, you're doing sacred art.
Super sacred.
Yeah, because there are these new movements. Something that is similar to my interest in the definition of visionary art is the definition of parkour. Parkour is still so new that there's so much discussion and argument in the parkour community, the quote unquote parkour community, as to what parkour even is. And what I've come to, the idea that I've come to is that parkour, or at least I want parkour to be whatever that individual person wants it to be for them. Whatever type of movement that they feel helps them express themselves at capacity, utilizing their environment. That for me is parkour, whether you're doing flips or not. And I think visionary art, in a lot of ways, like I've heard some people say that it's not visionary art unless it's inspired by a vision that you've had. But you've just described it as this more active process where you're incorporating abstract dream symbolism into it, where it's not necessarily inspired by this this vision that you've had.
It's a download.
I
had this
it's
download,
not just,
and now I know exactly what this painting is going to be.
And the painting is just a crystallization of that vision,
which is amazing.
Amazing. But that isn't not the end all be all definition of visionary art. Something that I'm really inspired by Hillary Astrid, and she has a really interesting creative process, because when she starts a piece, like, she doesn't know at all where it's going. Like, it's like her creative process is like driving on a dark road with a car whose headlights only illuminate 10 feet in front of you.
I totally resonate with that.
Yeah, and I know you do, and you're also a visionary artist, I would say.
Who's to say? It's funny because, like, before I, moved to Cosm, I feel like people were calling me a visionary artist before I was calling, before I was like, I'm a visionary artist, because that's why I choose to go with flowedelic, because that's something that I made up, and
it's
that's how
thing.
I feel, and that's how it is. Anytime I say, "Yep, it's flowedelic," people are like, "Oh my gosh, it is."
And no one can tell you that, oh, no, that's not what flowedelic means.
Yeah.
No one else has any kind of like authorship over that.
Yeah, and because the flow of the mind, the flow of our perceptions and everything, I think that it does align into visionary realms. So, it's kind of maybe just a road off of it. Like, I'm like, the cul-de-sac.
Yeah. How do visionary experiences or psychedelic experiences inspire your creative process?
Right. Well, 10 years ago, my first psychedelic experience highlighted the magnificence of nature, the absolute jaw-dropping, holy mambo. This is what we're surrounded by all the time.
Nature revealed itself to you through the psychedelic experience. What is that?
Fresh lens of like, wow, this is amazing, and this is always existing around us, the trees, all the elements, and feeling that immense amount of gratitude. And yeah, that's life. So that's what I'm going to paint about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So Caren, I think that is a good place to wrap it up. Is there anything else that you want to say about this piece?
Just that I hope it reminds people to enjoy the nectar of life and to not grasp too tightly on what we think things should look like, and to go with the flow. Mm-hmm.
And with that, the iceberg has been lifted. Caren, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Lifting the Iceberg podcast. You can find out more about Caren at CarenArtist.com, on Instagram at CCDiggity, and on Facebook at Caren Charles Designs. You can stay up to date on any new podcast at liftingtheiceberg.com or by following Lifting the Iceberg on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you to Alexis Spatty for designing the graphics for this podcast. You can find her at alexisspatty.com. Thank you to Caruso for the soundtrack Stay With Me. You can find Caruso on Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud.